see what Boyan can tell us about today's race. Boyan?
1%, 2%.
Sorry.
Hi.
Could you tell us a bit about today's race?
Today, okay, we have a clearing situation. We had some rain yesterday here, and the air mass is very moist and a southwesterly wind. So we expect the cloud base to be lower than in previous days, but we expect to have good conditions, with possibly after 4:30, 5 o'clock overdevelopment and a little bit of rain. So we have a race which goes all to the west. We go out to the west towards Pont de Suert, and then we go to the south of the Lorry Mountain, south of Sort, in a place called Beaumont, and then to the north, and then we come back. Yeah, so it's 200 kilometers. We hope it's going to be a very exciting race, and we hope that the weather stays good and it doesn't rain.
What do you think about the task today?
Maybe it's gonna be rain in the point 3 and 4, 4 o'clock. But I hope we're gonna be before 4 o'clock there.
So it was a very good race. What do you think about today?
Today is much more humid, but it looks very nice, and we will see. It will be a nice race, I think.
Okay, I will see you at the end. Have a good day.
Race day 4 in the SGP finals in Cerdanya. We had a 5 turning point task in tricky conditions with a strong southwesterly wind and a very moist air mass with a lower cloud base. And the start was good, with Mike Young first across the start line, but the strong wind was underestimated by many pilots who had a slow start and some even starting quite low. This enabled the field to spread out quite quickly, and we saw it split into 2 completely different groups. The group that went to the right to run the ridges and the mountain edges to the west, and the group that followed some cumulus along the south side of the valley, heading towards the first turning point at Cometa, which was on the west side of the Sort Valley. The group stuck together, and the southern group with Sebastian and Christoph Limper and Thilo and Peter Krajcek and Adam were all running very well under nice cumulus that was forming along the south side of the valley in front of the Cadi Mountain. This gave them a very quick run to the first turning point, to which they actually beat the guys who were flying in the ridges to the north. Everybody came on to the Lorry Mountain on the east side of the Sort Valley, where we saw everybody was climbing, and they climbed back up to a good altitude, with Thilo and Sebastian leaving very early and not bothering to take a full altitude so they could run into the turning point at Cometa. The crossing of the Sort Valley was not too expensive on altitude, and they crossed to turn at 2,300 meters. Thilo turned first, with Sebastian running in just behind him, and a lot of competitors still together. And there was still a good group of competitors approaching the turning point at more or less the same time. The race was now beginning to open out as they set off to the south, with Sebastian and Thilo pushing ahead on the southern leg. The southern leg across the Sort Valley down to Beaumont. Most of the competitors took a little climb at the first turn, allowing Sebastian and Thilo to push on ahead onto the lower mountains that run south from Seo down into the second turning point, at Beaumont. Second turning point is quite high, and you need to have a good altitude coming into there. And we can see that the entire competition field was still running to the south, but there was round the first turning point was Thilo and Sebastian. They ran off to the north and they started to separate. And about halfway down that leg, Sebastian stopped to climb in quite a good thermal, and Thilo went much more to the west, and he didn't get such a good climb. Sebastian climbed up to nearly 3,000 meters, and Thilo's climb didn't take him so high. This was a very critical part of the race, because the difference that happened here, the difference in altitude, never really was pulled back. Sebastian turned first, along with Gintas, and Gintas and Sebastian then set off for the next leg, and they were a few kilometers in front of Thilo. The next leg was very short, and they were very quickly along the ridge into this leg to head off on the southern direction back towards the fourth turning point. We saw Thilo turn a little bit behind Sebastian and Gintas, but in a similar sort of altitude. The gap that had opened up at this stage was about 3 kilometers and just almost the same altitude, not much difference there. Thilo turned and he took a slightly more easterly route down to the next ridge, and at this point Sebastian came back in to join him, and he had caught up because the altitude was almost the same and the distance now was the same again. So there's almost no difference, but Sebastian just had 50 or 60 meters. Gintas was with them, and Gintas was able to find the same climb from which they ran on to the fifth turning point. Sebastian and Thilo turned together, and from here it was really a final glide. They needed the energy on the ridges. Thilo was always just a little bit lower, and this meant that he had to fly around the ridges, and he couldn't really gain any benefit from being in the stronger lift lower down on the ridge. Sebastian was able to fly much more directly, so Thilo could never close the gap and was always 50 to 100 meters lower and a few meters behind. The two leaders stayed together until the control point, and in the control point Sebastian was ahead of Thilo just by half a kilometer or so, and they never really closed up on this. The gap remained the same, but both of our top pilots were pushing and pushing, and we can see that they are down to the minimum altitude, even 2 kilometers before the finish. They only have 50 meters to spare. This gave us a very exciting finish, with both Sebastian having to slow down to 100 kilometers an hour to ensure he got no penalty, and Thilo was really short of altitude here, and he crossed the line going really slowly, 100 kilometers an hour in his Ventus 3, but still for a good finish, having managed to stay above the 1300 meter baseline. Next was Gintas. Gintas was also marginal on his glide, but he came back okay, closely followed by Louis in Fox, Quebec. So Gintas was third and Louis was fourth. There was a good battle taking place for 5th and 6th place, and Max was in front at the control point, but Peter Temple had a little bit more altitude, and we saw Peter slowly closing the gap until 2 kilometers before the line he overhauled Max and pulled in front to find himself in a good 4th position. At this point, Christoph Limpert also took the opportunity to pass Max, and he just crept ahead of him at the finish line. And we saw a fantastic race, terrific finish from everybody, with Thilo and Sebastian setting us up for a great last 2 days racing. Then the next pilots to come in were John Gatfield and Mike Young. Mike was the last in the points today.
So congratulations, Sebastian. How was the day?
It was a very fast race. Initially, I thought we will follow the ridges, but just 5 minutes before the start line was opened, it disappeared in this part. So we had to follow the line over the middle of the valley. I thought it could be a mistake, but then coming back, he went west again, and it was a mistake. So with Gintas, we followed an energy line up and down, upwind and downwind, and this little leg was just to extend a little bit, but it was just one energy line, and the final was just reach.
We were together coming to the main ridge. I saw Sebastian, who was always a little bit higher than me. I saw him pulling up very strong, and I said, well, let's pull already a little bit earlier to use the whole lift, but I pulled in the sink, and that was the 100-meter difference, which I was not able to catch up. The distance got smaller and smaller and smaller. Unfortunately, the task was not 20 kilometers longer. Otherwise, I probably could have catch. I don't know. You do a brilliant final glide. Well done, Sebastian.
Hello and welcome to the prize giving of the 4th race of the Grand Prix in Cerdanya. Today in 3rd position with a speed of 143 km per hour, Ginter Stuber. In 2nd position with 147 km per hour, Tilo Hollyhouse. And in 1st position with 148, Sebastian Kawa.
Tough race here, yeah.
Co, mamy to otwierać?
Yeah.
Bring better, yeah?
Dobra.
Right. In the air you're faster, yeah?
Wait for Gint. Third position.
Yeah, right, all right. Whoa!